I'm Don Carson. I'm a senior art director here at Mighty Coconut, working on Walkabout Mini Golf. I started out as an illustration major in college, and then eventually worked for Walt Disney Imagineering, designing theme park attractions, which I did in the 80s and the 90s, and then sort of migrated to a hybrid career of doing theme park concept design and then also video game design, all kind of culminating into the work that I do at Mighty Coconut, which is really very theme park-like in that we're creating story-driven environments for people to meet up in and experience. The Nautilus is actually the first thing I started working on a year ago. It's a wonderful opportunity to not only meet in a place that is straight out of literature, but also it allows us to do our sort of walkabout interpretation of what the Nautilus might be like and what it might be like to explore its various decks. As the course begins, you actually start in a vehicle that approaches the Nautilus, which is new for us. We have been integrating ride elements into our courses, but we felt it was really important to get that establishing shot on the outside of the submarine, so you had a sort of a reference for where you're going as opposed to being plopped right down here at the first hole. And then our goal was to, at the end, feel like you've wandered through all the various decks and that each of them is fulfilling an expectation of what it might be like to be inside of Jules Verne's or Captain Nemo's Nautilus. So we start with the sort of map room and make our way to the tip of the Nautilus. Something we've been starting to integrate a lot more is not only the miniature golf experience, but also create environments to hang out in, because we've heard a lot of multiplayers like to play a game and then they spend another hour or so just visiting with friends. So we've also worked in comfortable seating and places that seem like an obvious place to hang out. Each of the holes are themed to sort of a steampunky Captain Nemo feel, and we've tried to integrate a new mechanic. In this case, it's steam, so that you'll see that some of our holes actually have a mechanic that blows the ball around using pipes that are blasting steam. Then we work our way this direction, and we're heading past the crew quarters. And you can actually peer into one of the rooms and see how the crew live in their bunk beds. And then we move our way into sort of this establishing shot of the Salon, which is the largest room in the sub, which is 2 levels. And this includes not only the dining room, a meeting area, as well as the iconic organ that Nemo plays. One of the challenges we had was so much of people's sort of collective idea of what the Nautilus is based upon Hopper Goff's designs for the Disney film. And so we knew that we had to pay an homage to that without necessarily recreating it. So we tried to lean heavily into the bolted steel, brass, red curtains and sort of posh Victorian furniture wherever we could. We also wanted to create sort of tight spaces that open into larger spaces so that you get sort of a glimpse at some of the holes you're going to experience later when you work your way through the decks. Not only in this space where you're looking down into the Salon, but there's also grates in the floor that you'll actually be able to see down into areas that you're going to visit. I was the lead art director on Splash Mountain for Walt Disney World. I worked with the team that designed Toontown for Disneyland and Blizzard Beach for Florida. And then I've worked on probably 100 other projects over the years in various capacities, almost always on the concepting end. And especially when I was doing freelance work for them, it was almost exclusively doing those early drawings and designs that then eventually would fuel a project that a team would take and run with. When you're in the engine room, you should have no doubt that you're in the engine room. When you're in the salon or the kitchen or Nemo's own quarters, there's a really definite leaning towards what specifically fulfills the expectations of someone that were told that they were going to go into the Nautilus and be in those spaces. We'll make our way down through all the pipes and the gears. For this particular one, it did start as a drawing, as a multi-layered illustration that showed each of the sort of layers of the cake as we designed it. The courses we're working on now, we actually do a lot of that initial work in Gravity Sketch, where Henning and Lucas and I will jump into a shared collaborated model, and we'll actually sketch in 3D and start really roughly building out the layers. That's the easiest and fastest way for us to collectively get an idea of what a course is. In this particular case, I ended up starting with that bird's eye view with the various layers, really just to get in my head where each of these theme spaces were. And then the other thing that we run into is we always know that we have 18 chapters. We have 18 moments that we can theme specifically to that environment. And so starting out with the top of the first layer of the Nautilus, that's hole 1, and working our way, knowing that hole 18 was going to be the climactic sort of finale of the experience. Now we're down working our way into the Salon. We really wanted this space to be reminiscent of, past versions of the Nautilus, and yet our own interpretation of it. Opulent, meandering. We also wanted to squeeze as many holes as we could in this space, so you spent a lot of time in here. And we also created lots of places to hang out and sit if you wanted to do that. We also get kind of our first glimpse at the squid, which we get to see a little bit later. And so the holes are laid out so that they zigzag you through the space, back and forth. And then every so often we introduce the steam mechanic. So in this particular case, the steam's blowing up, which is going to cause your ball to levitate and pop up to this upper surface. This is really different than our previous ones, even Labyrinth, in that it's so compact that each of the rooms have so much detail and so many props in it. We've had to be very clever with what isn't drawing. So when you're in this space, the floors above and below you may not be being rendered right now, just so we could lavish a lot of detail and polygons in the spaces that you're going to be entering. So this is the kitchen. All the various business you expect to go on in a kitchen that serves only seafood. And then lots of pipes and steam and ways in which your balls can traverse the environment. Finally moving into this sort of interim hallway, the wine cellar. We get a glimpse down into hole 17 from up here. And then we make a left into Nemo's private quarters, trying to get that marriage between miniature golf park, all the mechanics necessary, and that also rationalizes that someone would spend the night in here or work on their papers or do their experiments. And then we make our way down into the lower part of the submarine, down in here. And then, unlike the engine room, we were trying for just the sense of ballast and storage and what all would be down in this space. We make our turn over here to hole 17, which is we're starting to see the squid attacking the interior of the sub, becoming an obstacle. And then finally the finale, which is hole 18, where the full-on squid attack is. I actually started at Mighty Coconut with a fan letter that I wrote to Lucas and the team because I think Bogey's Bonanza had come out, and I finally was just motivated to write them and tell them what a fantastic job they were doing and how similar a lot of the choices that they were making were to the theme park world that I came from. And luckily they were hiring, and so I got swept in a year ago into the projects, and they've got a list of at least 100 different course ideas that they would love to do, and really high on that list was this pack of Jules Verne courses. All that was established before I arrived. And as a theme park person, my projects can take 3 to 5 years, and there's no guarantee in that 5 years that it won't get canceled at some point. And it might even open in a part of the world that you may never go to, Beijing or the Middle East or someplace. So the idea of being able to work on something that takes about 9 months to produce, and then once it is released, you could show anybody in the world the work that you've been doing, as long as they have a VR headset, has been really exhilarating. Also, as a concept artist, a lot of my stuff happens at the beginning, but then goes through about 300 hands before it ends up as a physical attraction. And here, there's a dozen or more artists that are working together to produce something that is very similar to those initial concepts. So there's a lot less watering down or evolution, what you see here is very much like those initial concepts that were designed at the very, very beginning. And then there's a tremendous handing off to someone and then having them return something that's better than you would imagine was possible. And that's definitely something I found with the Walkabout and Mighty Coconut, is each of the designers brings their own sort of sensibility to it and passion, and we end up with something that is not one person's vision, but everybody's collective idea of what this course should be. And that's been true all along up till now, and then all the ones we're currently working on for the future. I've got my own personal short list, and I'd say at least half of them we're currently working on. One of the things that I love about working on these various courses is that they are really wish fulfillment. When we decided that we were going to be doing the Jules Verne courses, we jumped in also to Journey to the Center of the Earth, which is being worked on right now. And there's an 8-year-old version of myself, that kid that would go to the backyard with a shovel and know by lunchtime you would have dug to China. And this idea that we get to design that journey from that book, where we descend into the earth and then go through those iconic environments one after the other, granted playing miniature golf all the way to sort of a climactic ending, is pinch-worthy. You know, you really are like, I get to do this. Similarly with Around the World, which is going to be a very interesting interpretation, which I won't get into too much, but that's an amazing environment as well that we're currently working on. We also have Myst, which is coming, and that's looking really beautiful. As someone who played that game back in the 90s when it first came out, it really formed the work that I do today, in the idea that one could create an experience that is that detailed and that story-driven that you take 40 hours to work your way through. And now with the Myst course coming out this fall, the idea of being able to meet your friends in that environment is very exciting for all of us. And then we've got some more surprises coming on into the rest of the year, including we are currently working on an AR version of the game that will work on your phone, and you'll be able to play using that, but you'll also be able to play with those people who currently have a VR headset. So there should be no barrier to your ability to play as long as you have a phone to play it on.